The warning. Ignored. The transmission came through at 0347 hours, standard galactic time. Commander Zeth of the Krexian Imperial Fleet was reviewing patrol reports when the communications officer rushed into his command chamber aboard the flagship, Dominance. "Sir, we're receiving an urgent broadcast on all frequencies," the officer announced, his scaled hands trembling slightly. "Origin unknown, but the signal is strong. Very strong." Zeth's crimson eyes narrowed as he gestured for the message to be played. The bridge fell silent as an alien voice filled the air, speaking in perfect Krexian despite clearly belonging to no species they recognized. "To all who can hear this transmission, do not attack the humans. Whatever grievances you may have, whatever ambitions drive you, abandon them now. You will never escape their wrath. This is not a threat. This is a warning born from experience. The humans may seem weak, scattered across their small worlds, but you do not understand what sleeps within them. Do not wake it." The message repeated, twice more before cutting to static. Commander Zeth stood in stunned silence for several moments before a harsh laugh escaped his throat. "Humans?" he spat, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "Some primitive species trying to intimidate the Krexian Empire with ghost stories?" His communications officer shifted nervously. "Sir, the signal came from beyond our mapped territories. The power required to broadcast on this scale." "Enough," Zeth cut him off. "Contact High Command immediately. This charade ends now." 3 days later, the Krexian High Council convened in the grand chamber of their homeworld. 12 of the most powerful beings in known space sat around the crystalline table. Their discussion focused on the mysterious warning and what it meant for their expansion plans. Chancellor Vex, eldest of the council, drummed his claws against the table's surface. "The humans have been monitoring our border movements. This transmission is clearly a desperate attempt to avoid conflict." "But sir," interjected Science Advisor Krim, "our intelligence reports suggest human technology is more advanced than we initially believed. Perhaps we should—" "Silence." Chancellor Vex's voice echoed through the chamber. "The Krexian Empire has conquered 17 star systems in the past decade. We will not be deterred by the whispers of unknown cowards or the primitive defenses of a species that has barely left their own solar system." General Threx leaned forward, his battle-scarred carapace gleaming under the chamber's lights. "Our scouts have identified 3 human colonies ripe for conquest. Nexus 7, Kepler 442b, and Proxima Centauri b. Total population: less than 2 million. A single strike force could eliminate them within hours." The vote was unanimous. The attack would proceed within the week. Meanwhile, on the human colony of Nexus 7, Administrator Sarah Chen was reviewing the morning agricultural reports when her deputy Marcus Torres burst into her office. "Sarah, you need to see this," Marcus said, his face pale. "We've been picking up some strange transmissions. Deep space origin." Sarah looked up from her datapad, noting the concern in Marcus's voice. At 35, she had led this colony for 3 years, transforming it from a struggling outpost into a thriving community of 50,000 people. "Strange how?" she asked. Marcus activated his portable display unit. "Listen to this." The same warning that had reached the Krexians now played in Sarah's office. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as the message concluded. "How long ago did we receive this?" she asked. 6 hours ago. It's been broadcasting on loop across multiple frequencies. Sarah, whoever sent this knows about humans specifically. They know we exist and they're trying to warn someone away from attacking us." Sarah stood and walked to her office window, gazing out at the peaceful settlement below. Children played in the parks while their parents tended to vertical farms and workshops. The colony had been built with hope and determination, representing humanity's growing presence among the stars. "Contact Earth immediately," she ordered. "Send them everything we have on this transmission. And Marcus? Begin emergency protocols." Quietly, Marcus nodded grimly. "You think someone's coming?" "I think someone's already decided to come, and that warning isn't going to stop them." Her instincts proved correct. 2 days later, Krexian strike forces emerged from hyperspace around all 3 human colonies, simultaneously. Commander Zeth personally led the assault on Nexus 7, confident that the human settlement would fall within hours. The attack began with orbital bombardment designed to cripple the colony's defenses. Zeth watched from his command ship as energy beams lanced down toward the settlement, expecting to see immediate devastation. Instead, translucent energy shields flickered to life around the colony, deflecting the worst of the bombardment. The shield technology was far more sophisticated than Crexian intelligence had suggested. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "their defensive grid is holding. Our scanners are detecting multiple underground installations we weren't aware of." Zeth's confidence wavered slightly, but he pressed the attack. "Deploy ground forces. Overwhelm their defenses with superior numbers." The first wave of Crexian troops landed expecting minimal resistance. What they found instead were human defenders who fought with a ferocity that shocked the invaders. Every corridor became a battlefield, every room a fortress. The humans used their knowledge of the colony's layout to devastating effect, turning maintenance tunnels into ambush points and civilian areas into killing fields. Marcus Torres led one of the defensive squads, his engineering background allowing him to jury-rig explosive traps from industrial equipment. He watched through his helmet's display as Crexian soldiers fell to improvised mines and automated defense turrets. "They keep coming," his squad mate Jennifer Park reported over the comm. "How many did they bring?" "Too many," Marcus replied, reloading his weapon. "But we just need to hold long enough for the evacuation ships to launch." In the colony's command center, Sarah Chen coordinated the defense while simultaneously managing the evacuation of non-combatants. Her fingers flew over control panels as she rerouted power to critical systems and directed civilian transports to hidden launch bays. "Administrator, we have Crexian forces breaching Sector 7, reported her security chief. "Seal it off and reroute the evacuation through Sectors 4 and 5, Sarah ordered. "How many civilians are left?" 3,000, mostly in the lower levels. Sarah's jaw tightened. They needed more time. "Deploy the final countermeasures. Everything we have." What the Crexians didn't know was that human colonies weren't just settlements, they were potential fortresses. Hidden weapon systems activated throughout Nexus 7, emerging from concealed positions to engage the invaders. Automated defense drones swarmed Crexian positions, while point defense turrets targeted their landing craft. Commander Zeth watched his casualty reports climb far higher than anticipated. What was supposed to be a simple occupation had become a grinding urban warfare nightmare. "Sir, we're losing too many troops," his ground commander reported. "The humans have turned their entire colony into a weapon. We need orbital support." Zeth hesitated. Full orbital bombardment would destroy the colony entirely, eliminating any value it might have as a conquered territory. But his losses were mounting, and the humans showed no signs of surrendering. "Begin selective bombardment. Target their command centers and weapon positions." The renewed orbital assault finally began to overwhelm the colony's defenses. One by one, the shield generators failed under sustained fire. Human defensive positions were reduced to rubble, forcing the defenders deeper into the settlement's underground sections. In the final hours of the battle, Sarah Chen stood in the colony's emergency command bunker, surrounded by her remaining staff. Reports flooded in of successful evacuations. Nearly 40,000 colonists had escaped on the hidden transport ships, including most of the children. "Ma'am, the last transport is ready to launch," Marcus reported, his armor scorched and damaged from the fighting. "We need to go now." Sarah looked around the bunker one last time. This had been her home, her responsibility, her life's work. Now it would become a tomb. "Initiate final protocol," she ordered quietly. Marcus's eyes widened. "Sarah, no. The evacuation ships are already clear of the blast radius," she finished. "The Crexians want our colony. Let them have it." The nuclear charges hidden throughout Nexus 7's infrastructure detonated simultaneously, creating a chain reaction that consumed the entire settlement. The explosion was visible from orbit, a brilliant flash that temporarily blinded the sensors of every ship in the system. Commander Zeth stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Where the human colony had been, only an expanding cloud of superheated gas remained. "Status report," he demanded. Sir, the entire colony is gone. All our ground forces. They were still inside when... I know what they were doing, Zeth snapped. What about the other strike forces? The reports came in over the next hour. Kepler 442b had followed the same pattern. Fierce resistance, mass evacuation, then total self-destruction. Proxima Centauri b had lasted longest, but eventually met the same fate. The Crexians had won nothing. 3 thriving human colonies were gone, along with nearly 15,000 Crexian soldiers. But worse than the military losses was the realization, slowly dawning on Zeth and his officers. The humans had been prepared, not just for attack, but for total war. Every colony had been designed for this possibility, every civilian trained for evacuation, every defender ready to die rather than surrender. And somewhere in the depths of space, that warning continued to broadcast. Do not attack the humans. You will never escape their wrath. As the surviving human evacuation fleets reached safe harbor, their transmissions to Earth carried more than news of the attack and heroic defense. They carried something far more dangerous to the Crexian Empire. They carried the coordinates of every Crexian ship and base their sensors had recorded during the battle. On Earth, the Global Defense Council convened an emergency session. General Patricia Hawkins, Supreme Commander of Human Military Forces, studied the reports with growing fury. 3 colonies, she said quietly. 50,000 civilians evacuated, but 10,000 who couldn't escape in time. The council chamber fell silent. Every member understood what those numbers meant. Humanity had just suffered its first major attack by an alien species, and the cost had been measured in innocent lives. The Crexians believe they have taught us a lesson. General Hawkins continued, her voice steady but carrying an undertone of barely controlled rage. They are about to learn that they have made the gravest mistake in their species' history. She turned to address the full council. I am formally requesting authorization for Operation Retribution, full mobilization of all human military assets. We will not simply respond to this attack. We will end the threat permanently. The vote was unanimous. As news of the authorization spread throughout human space, military installations that had remained hidden for decades began powering up. Shipyards that had operated in secret started launching vessels whose capabilities far exceeded anything the Crexians had observed. Research facilities released technologies that had been held in reserve for exactly this scenario. The humans had learned from their history. They understood that in a hostile galaxy, the best deterrent was overwhelming, decisive retaliation. The Crexians had wanted to test human resolve. They were about to discover what humanity was truly capable of when fully aroused to war. The wrath unleashed. The first sign that the Crexians had miscalculated came 3 weeks after their attack on the human colonies. Commander Zeth was reviewing occupation plans for other potential human targets when alarms began blaring throughout his flagship. Contact bearing Mark 77, his sensor officer shouted. Multiple signatures emerging from hyperspace. Zeth rushed to the tactical display, expecting to see a desperate human retaliation fleet. Perhaps a dozen ships seeking revenge for their lost colonies. What materialized before him defied all expectations. 200 human warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their sleek hulls gleaming with unknown alloys. These weren't the converted civilian vessels or patrol boats the Crexians had expected. These were purpose-built weapons of war, and they moved with a precision that spoke of decades of hidden preparation. Sir, his communications officer called, out, voice trembling. We're receiving a transmission. Put it through, Zeth ordered, though his confidence from weeks earlier had evaporated entirely. The voice that emerged from the speakers was calm, professional, and utterly without mercy. This is Admiral Rebecca Santos of the Human Defense Fleet. You attacked our colonies. You killed our people. You ignored the warnings you received. This ends now. Before Zeth could respond, the human fleet opened fire. The weapons they unleashed weren't the conventional energy beams or projectile systems the Crexians understood. These were something entirely new, focused gravity weapons that crushed Crexian ships from within, quantum torpedoes that phased through shields before detonating, and particle beams that seemed to ignore physical matter entirely. The Battle of Nexus system lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it ended, the entire Crexian strike force had been annihilated, save for a single communications ship that Admiral Santos deliberately allowed to escape. "Let them carry word back to their empire," she told her officers. "Let them know this is only the beginning." The lone Crexian survivor reached their homeworld 12 days later, its crew traumatized by what they had witnessed. The ship's sensor logs were analyzed by the Empire's finest military minds, but none could explain how the humans had developed such advanced weaponry without detection. Chancellor Vex convened an emergency session of the High Council, the recording of the battle playing on screens around the chamber. The council members watched in stunned silence as their primitive enemies systematically destroyed forces that should have been vastly superior. "This changes nothing," Chancellor Vex declared, though his voice lacked its previous certainty. "The humans revealed their hand too early. Now we know what we face. Deploy the Third Fleet. 60 ships should be sufficient to—" "Sir," interrupted a junior aide who had just rushed into the chamber, "we're receiving reports from our border colonies. They're under attack." What followed was a strategic nightmare for the Crexian Empire. Human fleets didn't strike at obvious targets or follow predictable patterns. Instead, they seemed to be everywhere at once, hitting supply depots, communication relays, isolated research stations, and mining operations with surgical precision. General Threx, the Empire's most experienced military commander, found himself fighting an enemy unlike any he had faced in 40 years of warfare. The humans didn't seek glorious battles or territorial conquest. They methodically dismantled the infrastructure that held the Crexian Empire together. "They're not trying to occupy our worlds," he reported to the High Council during one emergency briefing. "They're destroying our ability to wage war. Every strike targets something critical: fuel refineries, weapon foundries, fleet bases. It's as if they understand our military structure better than we do." The truth was even more disturbing than General Threx realized. For decades, humanity had been intercepting Crexian communications, studying their technology, mapping their supply chains, and analyzing their strategic weaknesses. When the Crexians attacked human colonies, they hadn't just provoked an enemy. They had activated a military machine that had been preparing for this exact scenario for over a century. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the human stealth frigate Shadow Dancer, one of dozens of ships conducting deep penetration raids into Crexian territory. Her current mission was typical of humanity's new approach to warfare: the complete destruction of a Crexian supply convoy carrying advanced sensors to their forward bases. "Target acquired," her weapons officer reported. 18 cargo vessels, 4 escort cruisers. "Take out the escorts first," Elena ordered, "then disable the cargo ships. I want their crews to survive long enough to send a distress call." The attack lasted less than 10 minutes. The Crexian escorts never even detected the human ship before their hulls were opened to space. The cargo vessels, stripped of their escorts and weapons, could only watch helplessly as their precious supplies were systematically destroyed. But Elena's true purpose wasn't just destruction. It was psychological warfare. As the surviving Crexian crews broadcast their desperate calls for help, they described impossible attacks by invisible enemies, weapons that defied known physics, and human forces that seemed to anticipate their every move. These reports spread throughout the Crexian Empire, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty that was almost as damaging as the physical attacks. Crexian commanders began second-guessing themselves, seeing human threats where none existed, wasting resources on defensive measures against attacks that never came. The turning point came 6 months after the initial human retaliation began. The Crexian Empire, once spanning 12 star systems, had been reduced to defending their core worlds. Their fleets were scattered, their supply lines severed, their military production crippled. It was then that Chancellor Vex made the decision that would seal his species' fate. Rather than sue for peace, he authorized the use of the Empire's most terrible weapon: viral bombs designed to render entire worlds uninhabitable. The target was Earth itself. General Patricia Hawkins received the intelligence report in her command, centered deep beneath the Colorado mountains. Crexian long-range strike forces were assembling for a desperate final attack on humanity's homeworld, carrying weapons that could kill every living thing on the planet. "Sir?" her aide asked quietly. "What are your orders?" General Hawkins studied the tactical displays showing human fleets scattered across dozens of star systems. With a single command, she could recall them all for Earth's defense. Instead, she made a different choice. "Signal all fleet commanders," she ordered. "Operation Omega is authorized. Terminate the Crexian Empire." Across the galaxy, human forces received their final orders. No longer were they to simply degrade enemy capabilities or conduct limited strikes. They were to ensure that the Crexian Empire ceased to exist as a military threat. The assault on the Crexian homeworld began 48 hours later. Admiral Santos, now commanding a fleet of over 300 ships, didn't bother with demands for surrender or negotiations. The moment her forces entered the system, they began the systematic destruction of every military asset they could detect. The Crexian home fleet, weakened by months of losses, put up fierce resistance. But they were facing an enemy that had spent decades preparing for total war, led by species that had survived 2 world wars, countless regional conflicts, and the harsh lessons of interstellar expansion. As Crexian ships died around their homeworld, that original warning continued to broadcast across the galaxy. "Do not attack the humans. You will never escape their wrath." Other alien species had been watching the conflict with growing alarm. The Altarians, a peaceful trading confederation, recorded every battle and began transmitting their own warnings to anyone who would listen. The Xanthari Collective, militant expansionists who had considered challenging human space, quietly withdrew their border fleets and declared permanent neutrality. The Vegan corporate states, notorious for their aggressive business practices, began offering preferential trade agreements to human colonies. But perhaps the most significant response came from the species that had sent the original warning. The Ancients, a secretive race that claimed to have observed galactic politics for over 50,000 years. Their representative materialized aboard Admiral Santos's flagship as the final bombardment of the Crexian homeworld began. The Ancient appeared humanoid, but ethereal, as if composed of living starlight. "You received our warning," the Ancient said, its voice echoing strangely in the ship's corridors. Admiral Santos studied the being without flinching. "Your people warned the Crexians, not us." "The warning was for all species," the Ancient replied. "We have seen what humans become when pushed to war. We hope to prevent it." "Then you should have warned them more effectively," Santos said coldly. "Or better yet, stop them from attacking us in the first place." The Ancient's form flickered with what might have been sadness. "We do not interfere directly. We only observe and occasionally advise. Your species is unique in the galaxy. Most civilizations wage war for conquest or resources. Humans wage war for justice, and that makes you far more dangerous than any empire or confederation." As if to punctuate the Ancient's words, the final Crexian stronghold on the planet below erupted in nuclear fire. The empire that had ruled 12 star systems for over 2 centuries had been reduced to radioactive ash in less than a year. "It's finished," Admiral Santos said quietly. The Ancient shook its head. "No, Admiral. It has only begun. Word of what happened here will spread across the galaxy. Every species will know that humans cannot be attacked without consequences. Some will respect that. Others will fear it. And a few will see it as a challenge to be overcome." In the weeks that followed the Crexian Empire's destruction, the galaxy indeed began to change. Trade routes were rerouted to avoid human space until formal agreements could be established. Previously aggressive species became suddenly diplomatic when dealing with human colonies. Territorial disputes that might have escalated to warfare were instead settled through negotiation when humans offered to mediate. But there were also darker responses. Secret alliances formed among species that viewed humanity's military capabilities as an existential threat. Research projects were launched to develop weapons specifically designed to counter human technology. And in the deepest corners of space, ancient enemies began to stir, drawn by the possibility of testing themselves against these newest apex predators. Marcus Torres, one of the survivors of Nexus 7, now served as a senior intelligence analyst for the Global Defense Council. His job was to monitor these developing threats and assess their potential danger to human interests. "The galaxy is reshaping itself around us," he reported to General Hawkins during one of their regular briefings. "We've achieved something unprecedented, universal, recognition of human military supremacy. But that recognition comes with a price. The price of being the strongest is that everyone either wants to challenge you or eliminate you," General Hawkins replied. "But that's a burden we'll have to bear. The alternative is allowing what happened to our colonies to happen again." Sarah Chen, who had escaped Nexus 7's destruction and now served as administrator for the new human colony, established on the ashes of a former Crexian world, understood that burden intimately. She stood on the observation deck of her new settlement, watching human families build homes where alien cities had once stood. The children playing in the parks below would grow up in a galaxy where their species was feared and respected in equal measure. They would inherit both the security that came from overwhelming military strength and the responsibility that came with wielding it. As she watched, Sarah noticed something that filled her with both pride and concern. The children weren't just human anymore. Some were the offspring of refugee families from species whose worlds had been devastated by the Crexians. Alien children who had found safety under human protection, who were learning human values alongside human customs. Humanity wasn't just becoming the galaxy's dominant military power, they were becoming its moral center, the species others looked to for justice when their own governments failed them. The original warning that had started it all continued to broadcast, now updated with new information. "Do not attack the humans. You will never escape their wrath. But if you come to them in peace seeking justice or aid, you will find no species more generous or loyal." And across the galaxy, as species great and small made their own calculations about how to coexist with these dangerous but principled newcomers, one thing became absolutely clear. The age of humans had begun. The Crexians had sought to test human resolve and found it unbreakable. They had tried to exploit perceived human weakness and discovered strength beyond their comprehension. Most fatally, they had ignored a warning that was born not from fear, but from hard-earned wisdom. In the end, the galaxy learned the same lesson that had been broadcast from the beginning. When it comes to humanity, it is far better to be their friend than their enemy. Because humans, once aroused to war, truly will never stop until justice is done.